Good evening, and welcome to another episode of America and Black and White, a podcast exploring the impact of diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, in the Black community. Today, we will discuss the effects of DEI, education, and economic repression on the Black community. Let me just start out by saying, those of you that are watching us on the YouTube channel, American Black and White, please, I would appreciate if you guys would subscribe and hit that notification button so that every time we do a broadcast, if you don't get a chance to see it, you'll always be notified that we have done some new content. So today, as I say, we're talking about DEI, we're talking about education, and we're also talking about economics and the repression on Black communities. So when it comes to DEI, and so we make sure we get what that means. That's diversity, equity, and inclusion. Okay. And so what we're going to be exploring about DEI is one, we're going to define DEI and its importance in promoting equality and justice. We're also going to discuss how DEI initiatives can address systemic racism and discrimination. We're going to explore the benefits of a diverse and inclusive society for the Black community. And we're also going to highlight successful DEI programs and their impact on Black individuals and their communities. Okay. So starting with the first thing is with DEI, we're going to define it, and we're also going to tell you its importance in promoting equality and justice. Okay, according to our dictionary, diversity, equity, and inclusion is a framework that aims to create a fair and inclusive environment where individuals of all backgrounds have equal opportunities to thrive. It recognizes and values differences in people's identities, backgrounds, and perspectives. DEI is crucial in promoting equality and justice by addressing systemic barriers that have historically disadvantaged marginalized communities, including the Black community. Now, let's just break that down and let's think about when we say diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, as we're bringing people in, and supposedly we're all the same and we're equal under our justice system and what justice is supposed to be, that says to me that anytime we go to a place where we're looking for employment, and you can go into these places and you don't see, let's say if you're a Black person, you don't see anybody that looks like you. And just depending upon the size of that business. So for those of you that don't know, that under the federal regulations, if you are a company that has more than 10 employees, you should be hiring, you should be mixing up the employment of your operation to where it's not just all white, or it's not just all Black, or it's not just all Hispanic, or it's not just all Asian. What it's supposed to be is that everybody's supposed to be allowed an opportunity, especially when it comes to the Commerce Clause, because people have to have the opportunity to earn and to spend. So when you go into a lot of these places, that especially the ones that are known to be traditionally racist, that don't hire anything but white people, these are the companies that people should be looking out for. And what I say when I say that, what I'm saying that to say is that because the Supreme Court, with them taking away affirmative action, which means that there's no other way around, being racist. to where if you're not doing what you're supposed to do and giving the equal opportunity, then you can be held liable. That same thing comes down to DEI, where we've got the same situation, but it's on the different side. And so, what is really going on is we've got the folks that are funding these politicians. That is, that's both from the House as well as the Senate, that are saying all of this diversity is nothing but something mystified, and it's a load of bull crap, and we don't have to do this because people know the right things to do, and they're going to do the right thing regardless of the case. Well, if that was the case, then programs, or shall I say actions, such as affirmative action and DEI would never have come into place. And what that means is that if the federal government don't step in to tell to regulate the country and have it doing what it's supposed to do, then if this the case with even though it's not really a majority, but the majority of these companies that are white owned, that are getting all of the contracts, they're making all of the money, and the other minorities have to fight for the other small portions that's remaining, or shall I call it the scraps, then they're just not allowed to do the things that they really can do. And so, well, when I say can do, I'm talking about the individuals. And so, DEI is very important when it comes to that, because I mean, it's like it's even into when we talk about justice, the justice system itself, shows us that, it has its place to decide when DEI is enforceable and when it's not. And when I say that, we're talking about um, how if you're black or you're brown, or maybe if you're Asian, um or if you're I don't know, if you're just African in general, or anything that's non-white, you're going to get, and they're not showing you um what they're supposed to be showing you, that is, as to giving you that opportunity that you deserve, then there's a problem there. And so, depending upon the size of that company, and the situation is at hand, people need to know that there are ways of holding their feet to the fire. There's an absolute way of doing that, you know. But again, justice is supposed to be blind, but apparently it can see, because it determines when it wants to enforce and when it does not want to enforce. Now, when it comes to folkways and mores, you know, hey, we got to get better, because these things are they're just not working properly. But when it comes to DEI and these situations, it's just shedding some light on this, that's letting you as individuals out there that are watching this to know that there are ways of holding their feet to the fire. That is, those folks that are violating the laws, they're violating your civil rights. There are ways. The second thing that we want to talk about under DEI is we're going to discuss how DEI initiatives can address racism and discrimination. DEI initiatives can help dismantle systemic racism and discrimination by promoting a culture of respect, understanding, and belonging. By actively seeking diverse perspectives and experience, organizations can better identify and mitigate biases and barriers that perpetuate inequality. Through inclusive policies, hiring practices, and training programs, DEI initiatives can create opportunities for Black individuals to excel and advance in their careers. Now, let's let that sink in. How many times, most of you that are watching this show, you're the Black man or you're the Black woman in the organization, and you have to be more than qualified. You have to be overqualified, and you are um, you are doing your job that you're supposed to be doing. But you got some individuals that are not doing their job. Okay. They have privilege and they can pretty much, just come on the job, get a free paycheck. Now, how many of you out there have had this situation that when this has occurred, that you found yourself in an odd man situation because what has transpired is because you didn't help this person or this person didn't know and they still felt like they didn't have to do their jobs, but you're held responsible because they didn't do their jobs. How does that work? I want you to let that sink in for a second. That definitely doesn't work well. And it doesn't work well because, you know, we know that this is all about racism and discrimination, but we also know that because you're hired, that means that they feel like you should do whatever they ask you to do. You're super Negro. How many of you out there have been super Negro? And when you're super Negro, and you've got Jan and Tina and Michael that can't do their jobs, but because it's known that you know what they should be doing, you're not the supervisor, you're not the owner, but because you're there, it is thought that you should have corrected the situation and fixed it. How many of you have had that situation? Please, I need you guys to write some of this in the comment section, especially those of you that are watching on the YouTube channel, because I know there's been several people that's gone through this exact same thing, and in the process of going through it, you're being held liable for the people that don't do their jobs, but you're doing yours. That sounds crazy, but these are the things that are happening and transpiring. This is the importance of having DEI, someone that's going to enforce DEI, hold these people accountable to make sure that people aren't having these horrible work experiences that come back and it haunts them for the longest. The next part of DEI that we're going to be discussing, we're going to explore the benefits of a diverse and inclusive society for the Black community. A diverse and inclusive society benefits. A diverse and inclusive society benefits the Black community by fostering a sense of belonging, representation, and empowerment. When Black individuals are included in the decision making process and have access to equal opportunities, they can contribute their unique talents and perspectives to society. Diversity also leads to innovation, creativity, and their problem solving, enriching the overall cultural and economic landscape. Wow, that's really deep. Now, how many of you in a workplace have gone through this kind of situation? This situation is one that actually um, is more frightening than anything. And that is because, it's saying that, with black people being included, that it makes everything that much easier. Who does it make it easier for? It makes it easier for those that are oppressing and repressing. And the reason being is because, again, when you have privilege, you do as you want to do. So while there are other folk are playing around and acting as though if they've got to do what they need to do, they're not doing that. What they're doing is they're skating and riding the clock. Why those other people have to work 5 times as hard to pull all the load in order to keep the company on even keel or even ground. That's how horrible that is. And our next part of this is we're going to highlight successful DEI programs and their impact on Black individuals and communities. Now, we're talking about the successful DEI programs that have shown positive outcomes for Black individuals and communities, such as increased representation in leadership positions, improved access to resources and opportunities, and a more inclusive workplace culture. These programs are often involve training on unconscious bias, mentorship programs, employee resources groups, and accountability measures to track progress and outcomes. By prioritizing DEI, organizations can create more equitable and supportive environment for Black individuals to thrive. Now, how many of us have been in that situation? I'm sure we can count them on one hand because I'm sure that there are some people that have actually had the opportunity to succeed. But in the process of that succession, what did they have to do? Were they all about the equity and inclusion that they were supposed to be about? Or was it, okay, well, I ain't have to worry about it because I already got the money that I need? My thing is this. Um, you can't put stuff like this that's been in place for a while. Then you want to come back and renege on it and you want to try to take it away. It's happening in quite a few states. Not all 50 yet, but it's coming. And so when people start doing that, well, when those people start doing that kind of stuff, then what's happening is that it's compromising each and every business. So if you got something like this that's happening in each and every business, then what do you have to do? You have to do your part and you have to say, hey, we can't do this today. We've got to change this. But be prepared to explain your answer because it's very, very important. This whole topic is. The next thing is we're going to be talking about education and its repression of Black kids, on Black kids. Examine examine disparities in educational opportunities and resources for Black students. Discuss the impact of systemic racism or um, discuss the impact of systemic racism on Black children's academic achievement. Address the school to prison pipeline and its disproportionate impact on Black youth. Explore strategies to improve educational outcomes for Black students, such as culturally relevant curriculum and teacher training. So for those of you that watched the show last night, um, you got a lot of insight on this particular portion of DEI. Um, Dr. Branch was explaining, with the school that he um, that he's at right now, how they've implemented wonderful programs to really diversify what they do. I am definitely one that's for that, and I think that that's a really good thing. But the thing is, not all of us are going to be fortunate enough to come across an opportunity like that. And so, with that being said, when we want to examine disparities in educational opportunities and resources for Black students, let's start with stop closing all the schools that are in Black communities and calling them failed schools because resources have been taken away from them, and there's no way that they're going to thrive regardless of the case. The only way that they can do that is if they're doing all of their tests, they're doing all of their schooling in their area, and they have people that look like them. So therefore, the school is going to do what it needs to do as long as their local county, city, and state government does this due diligence of putting all the resources into that school like they do with the other ones. That's all that's got to happen. The reason why that is not happening is because people are actually working on other ways of circumventing the law and making people's lives really bad. Now, what would make one want to do that? Where you want to take away education to stifle opportunities for kids in underserved communities? As evil as it sounds, there are some people that do that. They will continue to do that, and they really just do not care. There's some people that actually think that as for despite how things worked with oh Lord, what's the city that had the issue with the education. I think it was one of the Detroit schools of Michigan, and they had the problems with their education system, as they said. And this is like something that came to just all of a sudden here in the current years, but all those other times it's never happened. It's never happened. So when we talk about disparities in education, the disparities are only going to get worse, and they're only going to get worse because despite the fighting that most of us are doing to get this changed, there's just as many folk that are trying to keep it going on, and that's a sad thing. The next thing, we're going to discuss the impact of systemic racism on Black children's academic achievement. Mm. Now, this is a good one. And the impact, of the systemic racism is that, a lot of kids don't want to go to school. They just do not want to go to school and put up with that kind of madness. But it makes me wonder who will be sitting there thinking of ways of just creating havoc, pure mischief and havoc, and not let these kids move forward like they should. I think of my growing up in Alabama, and I think about my days of going to high school, middle school, elementary school there. It was definitely different, but the difference is that at that time, the same issues that was dealt with back then, they're actually dealt now. So People need to do what they need to do. So, our next thing is to address the school to prison pipeline and its disproportionate impact on Black youth. Okay. Um, in this prison pipeline, school to prison pipeline situation, this starts all the way back to when, you get kids in preschool and they're tracking them the whole entire time. And the process of the tracking system is to make the determination who's the prisoner and who's not, who's going to jail, who's not. This is what is being done instead of actually putting in the proper resources to actually educate these kids of being the best that they could be. Instead, they want to draw them down to be the worst that they can be. So that in itself just does not make sense to me at all. And the last part of this, and the educational part of this, is when it says explore strategies to improve educational outcomes for Black students, such as culturally relevant curriculum and teacher training. Well, we all know that that in itself, that's a falsity right there because that's never going to happen. Is that, you got a lot of these southern states where teaching people, um, these kids how to actually go through and just be successful, giving them everything that they need and let them go to work. Well, that's too much like right because when you don't want to be accountable for the things that you or your ancestors have done and you want to throw the blame on everybody else but them, then that's a problem. It is. I think we're just going to let that happen, right? Well, our last point is economic repression on the Black communities and its effects. When it comes to this, there's several things that we could discuss with that, and that is highlight the economic disparities faced by Black communities, including wealthy inequality or unemployment rates, discuss historical context of economic repression in Black communities, such as redlining and discriminatory lending practices, and three, examining the impact of economic repression on access to quality. Therefore, healthcare, housing, and employment opportunities. Explore solutions to address economic inequalities, such as investing in Black owned businesses and promoting financial literacy programs. Okay, so when we say highlighting these disparities that are faced, including wealth and inequality and unemployment rates, it's very simple to know that in the Black communities, there is no generational wealth. There is no wealth to actually leave behind. Some people have gotten to the opportunity to where they feel like they're a little bit more comfortable now, but the wealth inequality is that's another gap that's getting wider. You got the unemployment rates where once again, Black people are still not hired nearly as much as they should be compared to the counterparts. And that number is still hovering just over 10% of Black folk being unemployed. Well, I can say that it's a major difference than a few years ago where it was over 13%. Um, we're going to discuss the historical context of economic repression in Black communities, such as reading and discriminatory practice program. Okay, when it comes to this, It says an economic repression in the black communities. What that is simply stating is um, when it comes down to the redlining part of this is black people can only live in particular communities. Um, this is really known and shown big time in the city of Chicago. Chicago has a line where, black folks are not allowed to own property in other areas other than the South Side. But if you keep them hooked just in one side, why is it that they are still um, they're still leading with false premises, making people think that things are changing and getting better when they're not. Um, as far as the lending practices when it comes to black people, um, you get it's hard to get a loan for one thing to have access to capital, especially if you're an entrepreneur. But if you do get it and they want to use more than one way to do as they call the validation, if you should have a loan or not. But when you have um, the loan is not doing what it's supposed to do. Because if they're charging you an interest rate of at least 10%, that's a predatory loan. But what do you do about it? So, at any rate, we'll go over to this next one here, which is the impact of economic repression on access to quality health care, housing, and employment opportunities. Again, um, with the issues that we have now with DEI and the issues with the systemic racism and the repression and the incarcerations and the abuse by law enforcement and people going over the top and so forth. Nobody's actually talking about how this is actually affecting black men more so than anyone. They're just totally discriminatory. So this last point that we're going to talk about is we're going to explore solutions to address economic inequalities, such as investing in Black owned businesses and promoting financial literacy programs. When we're talking about investing in Black owned businesses, we should be starting a lot of these businesses in our communities. And people should be patronizing these communities and the people that work, in these communities should actually have a permanent houses here as well. And so if they're not allowed to do that, now we're talking about something that's violating some rights, but again, they say that's hard to prove. When we're talking about promoting financial literacy programs, we're talking about programs that help people to understand not only how to save money, but how to create generational wealth. We talk about entrepreneurship. Um, we're talking about building something that's going to thrive and it's going to do everything it's supposed to do. So that means that people in the community, yeah, we don't want you to be a hindrance, but sometimes that happens. So what we should be thinking about right now at this point is we just want to do everything that we're supposed to do when it comes to staying diverse, inclusive, and equal. Because um, when it boils down to it, um, if you're starting so far behind, you're not just going to catch up. But if you've been making strides for a ways and somebody feels threatened by you, then you've got a problem because what they're simply saying to you is that this is the way we do it, this is the way you're gonna do it. Don't enforce no law on me if I'm white. But you can say the same thing if you're black. But if you say that, not only looking at you like you're crazy, but you're probably going under the jail. One thing that's of a strange note is um, I could tell you that I've never actually had something like that happen to me where, you know, I had to be locked up. That sounds just ridiculous. But I just think that we've got to do a whole lot better, not just as a community, but as a country, and stop letting our people fall out with by this website or these things that are going on. Um, and they're just not doing what's supposed to be done. Everybody wants to live fair, everybody wants to have long health, have a long life. But it's just a fact that with all of these issues that are systemic, that black people are the ones that are facing the majority of the health crises or health issues. A lot of us may make it through a lot of things, but all of that eventually catches up. So we should not um, have to go through all these things that cause us to be sick all the time, causes us to um, not be that good person that people think that we are not. And it's just many many things here that when we have to constantly fight to be employed, because when it comes to starting a business, businesses don't really work out that much for you. But I just think that that's going to be that's a whole different ball game. And I honestly think that it's something that we should be talking over not only with our communities, but we should be talking this over with these elected officials that keep going back to Washington D.C. So I want to tell you all, I want to thank you all for this nice talk. I appreciate each and every individual that was here tonight. Um, we're not really having long conversations tonight, but again, this is a good show. That's good for all of us to have some fruit for thought. And what I would love to have is to get as much feedback about DEI as possible from each and every individual out there, because I like to know what you're thinking, why you're thinking it, and how it can be important.